Picture this. It's June 2018. You are deep in the heart of South Africa's Kruger National Park.
Right?
And it is the dead of night. Pitch black. Like the kind of absolute dark where sensory deprivation just starts to play tricks on your mind.
Oh, absolutely. The bush at night is a totally different world.
It really is. So a park ranger is out on monitoring duty, scanning the dense brush with a thermal camera, and he spots a scene that, well, biologists and rangers will be unpacking for years.
Yeah, it's such a wild observation.
Ripping through the darkness at maximum speed is this stark white blur. The animal is just pushing its physical limits, lactic acid building up, lungs tearing at the hot air, its entire body trembling with the sheer exhaustion of a dead sprint.
And flanking that frantic white blur are 3 earth-colored shadows.
Just matching his pace, stride for stride.
Exactly. But the detail that makes this observation so unsettling, at least for me, is the audio. Rather, the lack of it.
The silence.
Right. There is absolute silence behind them. No snapping branches, no roars, no active pursuit at all. Whatever caused them to run like this is, well, it's already done with them.
They are fleeing the aftermath.
Yeah.
Because miles behind them, just lying in the dust, is the reason for this panic. 4 bodies.
4 young male lions, completely decimated.
And we need to be clear about the nature of this violence, right? Because this wasn't like a chaotic, messy, territorial brawl.
No, not at all.
They were slaughtered with the surgical, calculated efficiency of veteran predators.
Right.
I mean, just hours earlier, those 4 dead lions had been walking the savannah at the top of the food chain.
And now they're gone.
Right. Now they're gone. And that white blur just keeps running until dawn.
It really forces you to reconsider everything you think you know about apex predators. You have these massive survivors staring out into the vastness of the savannah as the sun comes up, chests heaving, and they're just operating purely on shock.
And at the center of it all is this creature with unusually blue eyes, panting in the morning light. A creature that the entire Kruger National Park administration and the scientific community tracking him assumed had been dead for years.
Which is just incredible.
It really is. So welcome to the deep dive. Today we are opening up a breathtaking wildlife documentary source from Apex Truth. It chronicles the lost years of Casper, the white ghost of Kruger.
We are looking at a profound case study in adaptation today. I mean, it's a detailed look at how an animal born with a severe biological disadvantage, what honestly should have been a swift death sentence, managed to completely rewrite the hardwired rules of survival in the African savanna.
Totally. So whether you are a hardcore nature enthusiast or you're just someone fascinated by tactical strategy and resilience, you are going to want to stick around for this.
Oh, for sure. The source material is fantastic.
It lays out a literal masterclass in how extreme vulnerability can actually be the very catalyst that forges lethal intelligence. But to really grasp the biology behind that panicked midnight run in 2018, we have to rewind the clock a bit. Let's go back to 2014, to the exact moment Casper was born.
Yeah, his existence was a biological contradiction from day one. Casper was born with a condition called leucism.
Right.
To a tourist with a camera, he looks like this beautiful, majestic white lion. But ethologically speaking, this is a rare genetic anomaly resulting in an almost total lack of pigmentation.
Which means he has no melanin. And that does 2 major things, right? First, he has 0 protection against the brutal African sun.
Not at all.
And second, he has absolutely no camouflage. The Apex Truth source describes him perfectly as a beacon of meat.
A beacon of meat. It's harsh, but it's accurate.
When he was a cub, resting on the dry, golden grass, he looked like a glowing piece of the moon, just a lighthouse in a blackout.
And in an ecosystem driven by stealth and ambush, being highly visible is a fatal error. I mean, hyenas, leopards, rival male lions who constantly patrol for vulnerable cubs, they could spot him from incredible distances.
So how did he even make it out of cubhood?
He survived those early months strictly because of his mother's ferocious, hyper-focused protection. Especially since the wider pride kind of treated him as an anomaly. They shunned him.
But maternal protection in the feline world has a very strict expiration date. Like, biology eventually overrides the family bond.
It does. The eviction process is entirely hardwired. When male lions reach about 2 years old, which hit in 2016 for Casper, their testosterone levels rise.
And the big guys don't like that.
Exactly. The reigning dominant males of the pride perceive this as a future reproductive and territorial threat. So, to prevent inbreeding and resource drain, the young males are violently expelled.
The nomad phase. The source notes this is basically the statistical death row for felines. It is the most vulnerable window in a male lion's life. Okay, let's unpack this. Think about how hard it is to break a simple, everyday bad habit as a human. You have to consciously fight your own brain.
Right, it's exhausting.
Now imagine having to override millions of years of hardwired biological instinct just to survive the afternoon. That's what Casper was facing. For a normal, tawny-colored lion, their golden fur is their only armor during exile.
They use it to blend into the grass.
Exactly. They scavenge quietly, avoid detection until they grow large enough to claim a territory.
Hmm.
But playing this game for Casper would be like playing a deadly game of hide-and-seek in the dark, but you are forced to wear a glowing neon suit.
That's a great way to put it. Without that camouflage, Casper's eviction wasn't just a tough developmental phase, it was a summary execution. Human observers, biologists, guides, tracking teams, they simply waited for the inevitable.
And from 2016 onward, Casper just vanished.
Completely disappeared.
The most photographed lion in South Africa simply evaporated. No sightings, no tracks found in the concession areas. The logical conclusion was that the savanna's biological math had finally corrected the genetic error. The white ghost was dead.
But what's fascinating here is that the reality is much more compelling. Casper didn't die. He fundamentally recognized his own biological mismatch with the environment.
He knew he stood out.
Exactly. If your skin acts as a beacon on the illuminated chessboard of the savanna, you cannot play the standard game. So he abandoned the typical feline diurnal cycle entirely.
Usually a lion sleeps during the day in the shade of a tree, maybe wakes up for a drink and does the heavy lifting of hunting and patrolling at night.
Right.
But even under a full moon, Casper's white silhouette was a glowing target. And during the day, the lack of melanin meant the sun was physically punishing him, blistering his skin.
To mitigate both the heat and his extreme visibility, he buried himself in the absolute densest, most impenetrable vegetation he could find. We were talking about deep, hostile thorn bushes, completely dry riverbeds, and rocky ravines.
Places no one wants to go.
Areas where the physical terrain is so rugged that safari jeeps and traditional predators simply avoid them.
The only humans operating in these remote sectors are heavily armed anti-poaching units. And they are tracking human footprints, not feline mirages.
Right.
And at night, if Casper had to cross open ground, he didn't casually stroll like a normal lion. He sprinted frantically from cover to cover.
But this extreme isolation strategy created a new problem. Staying buried in dense thorns all day severely limits your hunting options.
Yeah, I imagine you can't really stalk prey from a ditch.
You can't ambush a herd of impala if you are trapped in a ravine. This causal chain, from lack of pigment to extreme hiding to the inability to hunt, forced Casper into a critical adaptation. He had to seek out other scavengers.
He ventured into this invisible shadow underworld and found other ghosts. 8 other rogue outcast lions.
Yeah, these were young males without a registered lineage, rejected from fractured prides, basically wandering the same brutal margins of the ecosystem.
Because the savanna doesn't require a shared bloodline to forge a coalition.
Well, no, it only requires the shared scent of hunger and the need for cooperative scavenging. They banded together, forming a massive, unprecedented coalition of 9 male lions.
I want to look at the mechanics of this group, because Casper's role completely flips here. He goes from being an isolated liability to becoming the coalition's early warning radar system.
Because of his extreme vulnerability, Casper operated in a constant state of hypervigilance. He conditioned the group to move in total silence.
They didn't roar to announce their presence.
No, they didn't posture. They used their sheer numbers to quietly steal carcasses from leopards and small clans of hyenas, eating well and growing incredibly heavily muscled.
Okay, let's build on that, because I am struggling with the math of what happens next.
Okay.
If you have a unified, heavily muscled militia of 9 young male lions, that sounds like an unstoppable force. How does a group that massive and powerful end up completely routed and fleeing for their lives like we talked about in the intro?
It comes down to ethology versus raw physical size. The drive for territorial expansion in young males is overwhelming. Because there were 9 of them, they ate a massive amount of resources, which forced them to roam wider and wider.
They needed more space.
Yes. The problem wasn't their strength, it was their lack of boundary recognition. They failed to read the scent markers of the landscape and crossed an invisible border into a territory heavily occupied by a coalition of dominant, veteran males.
And a veteran lion fights very differently than a young nomad.
Vastly differently. Young lions rely on size, showy posturing, and daylight intimidation. Veterans rely on asymmetrical warfare. Their jaws and neck muscles have been evolutionarily adapted over years of taking down massive prey like buffalo.
They know how to kill.
Right. They don't want a chaotic, energy-draining brawl. They target the ultimate biological vulnerability. Precisely. The veterans mapped the position of the 9 young nomads, waited for the temperature to drop at night, and infiltrated their perimeter while the young males were resting. It is a calculated tactic designed to eliminate a threat before the threat even wakes up.
That is terrifying. By the time the first warning growl echoed, the veterans were already breaking cervical spines.
They went straight for the throats.
It was a surgical elimination. 4 of Casper's coalitions were dead before they could even mount a physical defense. Which loops us back to that frantic June 2018 sprint. Casper survived because his pale coat made him the most obvious target in the moonlight. He had to react faster and run harder than the rest.
5 lived, 4 died. And the documentary source really explores how witnessing this massacre fundamentally rewired the survivors. It altered their threat detection baseline.
So it changed them permanently.
In ethological terms, experiencing that level of severe, sudden predation induces a state of permanent hyperarousal. The casual wandering of their youth was gone. Over the next 2 years, the 5 survivors adopted a deeply disciplined tactical approach. They became known to tracking units as the Zonga Coalition.
And the reports coming from the deep anti-poaching patrols were staggering. They documented a 5-male coalition led by a colossal 200-kilogram white lion with a face covered in war scars.
The genetic anomaly had become a frontline general.
They systematically located a fertile territory, targeted the resident males, and removed them. Casper established his own borders, bred with the females, and secured the apex position. But his trauma response continued to dictate his behavior.
Even as a reigning dominant male, Casper never forgot the vulnerability of his own skin. During the day, he would completely vanish into the brush, leaving his 4 earth-colored brothers out in the open, acting as the visible rulers of the pride.
Wow.
Only at night would the ghost emerge to patrol the perimeter.
It's a brilliant adaptation.
Oh.
But the biological mechanics of the savanna operate on a relentless cycle of replacement. Dominance is temporary.
Always.
By late 2020, that cycle caught up with the Zonga. A new super coalition appeared on their borders, composed of 9 young, starving, fearless males. It was a violent mirror, reflecting Casper's own history right back at him.
The sheer numerical advantage dictated the outcome. The invaders overwhelmed the Zonga, killing one of Casper's brothers in combat.
The invaders also systematically executed Casper's cubs. We should probably explain why that happens, because to us it sounds purely malicious, but it's deeply rooted in reproductive biology.
It's called infanticide, and it is a standard evolutionary strategy for incoming male lions. Female lions nursing cubs will not go into estrus.
So they cannot get pregnant.
Exactly. By eliminating the previous male's cubs, the invaders trigger a biological reset in the females, bringing them into heat so the new males can immediately sire their own genetic lineage.
Casper's entire kingdom is dismantled. He is backed against the wall of total annihilation. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
A typical dominant male lion often fights to the death in these scenarios, right? Driven by the biological imperative to defend his territory. But Casper looks at the math. 4 against 9. And he initiates a tactical retreat.
He just leaves.
Think of it like a chess grandmaster coldly sacrificing their queen to keep the king alive for a new game. Or like a controlled burn in forestry management. You deliberately sacrifice the surface vegetation, the territory, and the pride to ensure the deep roots, the core surviving brothers, stay alive for the next season.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the stakes of that retreat are incredibly high. The life expectancy of a defeated male lion who has lost his territory drops to almost 0.
Because they have no safe zone.
Exactly. You lose your hunting grounds and your safe resting places. Everywhere you step, you are crossing the scent boundaries of hostile prides. You are essentially trespassing in a war zone from every direction. Casper needed a flawless escape route and a geographical map he already implicitly understood.
So he points his compass toward the most unlikely destination imaginable. He initiates a stealth march back to the exact territory where he was born.
The very land that biologically evicted him years prior.
This march requires months of navigating across the vastness of the Kruger ecosystem, completely undetected. Which is physically absurd when you think about it.
Yeah.
We're talking about a 200-kilogram stark white animal the size of a grand piano trying to tiptoe through dry brush.
Right.
How is that mechanically possible?
It's possible because he leveraged the physical terrain to his advantage. They traveled almost exclusively through completely dry water
Or
corridors.
riverbeds.
Because of the acoustics and the thermal dynamics, the deep sand dampens the sound of their footfalls, allowing for near-silent movement. Furthermore, the steep banks of the ravines block line of sight from the plains above, while trapping cool air that helps regulate Casper's body temperature.
Keeping him out of the punishing sun.
Yes. They moved during the dead hours of the night, dodging anti-poaching patrols and safari guides.
The world that once deemed him too visible to live couldn't capture a single frame of this migration until April 2021.
Wow.
At 5:33 in the morning, with the sun just breaking across the Kruger horizon, a massive pale shadow stepped out of the tall grass and onto a dirt road.
The shock across the radio networks of the safari guides was palpable. The ghost of Kruger had materialized. But he wasn't the vulnerable glowing cub of 2014.
No.
He was a heavily scarred veteran, flanked in a tight tactical formation by his 3 battle-hardened brothers.
He had mapped the political scent markers of his childhood home. He somehow recognized that the dominant roars that used to echo across those plains were gone. The old alliances that had chased him out were dead or crumbling. He brought the war directly to his own backyard and violently reclaimed the land.
It's unbelievable.
The lion, who was rejected as a genetic error, was now the apex authority dictating survival on that very grass. So what does this all mean?
Well, when you synthesize the data from Casper's life, the takeaway is profoundly clear. The physical trait that made him a constant target for assassination, his lack of pigment, is precisely the mechanism that forced him to develop unparalleled tactical intelligence.
He had to be smarter to survive.
If he had possessed normal camouflage, he would never have learned how to manipulate the terrain, the acoustics, and the shadow underworld of the savannah to such an elite degree.
The extreme vulnerability forged the ultimate survivor. I mean, every loss, the eviction, the death of his brothers, the fall of his first kingdom, was converted into a lesson in biological warfare.
He was literally forced to evolve his behavior beyond the standard constraints of his species.
It is a remarkable testament to the sheer force of adaptation. And the source material leaves us with a final, deeply provocative question that I really want you, the listener, to mull over today.
Yeah, it's a profound thought.
When Casper made that incredible months-long stealth march back to his birthplace, was that simply a stressed animal defaulting to familiar geographic routes encoded in his early development?
Or does the highly calculated stealth nature of that infiltration suggest a higher cognitive function, a conscious, lingering memory of the specific terrain and the entities that rejected him?
Did he merely wander home, or did he deliberately choose to return as a judge, marching back to deliver a definitive verdict on the very ecosystem that once sentenced him to exile? It shifts your entire perspective on what is happening behind the eyes of an apex predator. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.